Welcome back to Grit and Gut Podcast, where toughness talks. The grit, the grind, the gut, and the greatness, all things wrestling. I'm your co-host, Coach Craig Van Dyke.
And I'm Mike Harbison, and today we're talking with Andy Lowy from the Veterans World Team.
That's right, Andy. Welcome to the show. We're so glad to have you, man. He was new to the Veterans team this year, and prior to that, he was a three-time Maryland state champion, Fargo All-American, wrestled for Princeton. He was a 4-year starter there, All-Ivy, nationally ranked guy at 174 pounds. He came, I don't know if he had stopped training. We'll get into that, but he came out of, if he was retired, he came out to the Veterans World Team this year, and I got to meet him and watch him wrestle for the first time. And boy, what a great addition to the team, Andy. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So I guess first question I'm gonna put out there is how did you get back into like the Veterans World Team competing wrestling again, and how long did you take time off and different things like that?
Yeah. So I was like, after college, I didn't really do much for a couple years, and then was kind of just like lifting weights a lot, actually. So I put on like 20 pounds of muscle after college because I wasn't wrestling, but I was like powerlifting like 6 days a week. And then I started getting back on the mat. Like once I got to California for my PhD program, I was at USC and they had like a club program. So that was like 2017 to 2023. I took over as the head coach there and sort of helped grow their program and was wrestling with some of their bigger guys. One of them, or two of them actually ended up becoming All-Americans, like the 184 and 197. And so that sort of got me back in shape and also got, me a little bit hungry to compete again. And then like 2025 was like, I think I'm still at that point, like had kind of gotten out of shape again, but I like still had the hunger at least and was like, yeah, let's go for, I'd heard about the Veterans Worlds. Yeah, let's try to make it happen, see what we can do.
Absolutely. And you had a great debut for us, man, coming out as a world medalist in your first go round. Some guys wait many years to get that, but you did great. You had some great battles with the Russians in there, and man, it was such a pleasure to watch you compete. Take us through a couple of those matches, because I believe you had 2 matches with Russians during that. So take us quickly through both of those matches versus the Russians there in Hungary.
Yeah, so in the quarterfinals, I had one Russian who was really tough guy, like really fit, strong. Like the whole match was sort of like, all my muscles like were burning. And I kept seeing him kind of like looking back up at me, almost like seeing like, is this guy going to break soon or what? Like, because he was down like, so I mean, at first he was winning and then, no, I got the first takedown. So I was up 2-0, but then he got a push out and then a takedown to take a lead 3-2. And then I got a push out to take the lead 3-3. And then I think I got another push out. So I was up 4-3, but the whole time he was like trying to get that last push out for like a minute. And it was just kind of a battle because he was very strong, had a really good pace. I just knew in my head, like, I'm not going to break. Like I'm going to win this match. This is mine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then my second one again, and then the next match in the semifinals was against another Russian. And that guy was a very different wrestler from the first one. He wasn't like his pace was much slower, but he was very technical. And so he capitalized on one of my mistakes pretty early on. I was up 1-0 after like a shot clock thing. When I was wrestling with a really high pace, sort of lots of shot attempts, and he was kind of just fending stuff off. So I got that first point. I'm on shot clock, but then quickly after that, he caught me hanging on the collar tie for like a little bit too long and hit a really nice trapped arm throw for 4. So that was tough. I was down 4-1, had to try to come back from that deficit. Ended up I think I lost like 10-9 in the final score. So it was quite a battle, lots of back and forth. I think I learned a lot from that match in terms of like freestyle savvy as well, because I gave up a couple exposures that, just kind of like didn't even know that I was getting scored on actually, like during the match until actually even
for sure.
Coach Brown was like, so some of them were a little questionable, but like didn't think I was quite at 90, but definitely learning.
You live and you learn. So in freestyle at the Worlds, you lost in the semifinal, so that pulls you back into the repechage. So you're immediately going for a bronze medal. And talk to us about that match and that moment when you won that bronze medal for Team USA.
Yeah. I was really pumped for that match. I was like, this is my last match of the tournament. And, I'd had in my head that I wanted to be a world medalist for months and was just,
Yeah.
training every day, multiple times a day. And I just wanted it so badly. So really had like maximum focus, made sure my warm up was perfect, all my nutrition, trying to make my body feel as good as it could despite injuries and soreness from the previous matches. So I was obviously nervous, but also like felt really good for that match. And I went in and just started attacking right away, scored a quick takedown, and then kind of just kept rolling. I ended up I was up 8-0 within like a minute and a half. It just kind of kept shooting, kept scoring. And then I ended up pinning him in the first period.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was the most awesome feeling. I was so pumped to be a world medalist.
Absolutely. Congratulations to you, Andy. That was an awesome
Congrats, because that is a
Thank
great
you.
feeling. I remember like my first one was like, it's awesome. But so now that you've done your first vet worlds, and you have that experience under your belt, how would you say like the competitive aspect was at the vets worlds after the fact compared to what you thought it was going to be like going into it? Like how would you say your either thought process was right on point on the level of competition or a little bit off either way?
I didn't really know what to expect, to be honest.
Yeah.
I I think it was probably roughly, I mean, I knew like I'd heard, there's going to be some Olympians
Yeah.
somewhere in the weight bracket, former Olympians, former senior world medalists,
Yeah.
world team members, so I knew it's kind of a crapshoot, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know like the accolades of the guy who beat me in the
Yeah.
semis, but some of all those is clearly like very experienced, tough
Yeah.
Russian. And I felt really confident going in because like I had been training with like senior level guys, like this one, like a week before I'd wrestled with this Egyptian guy who was like a great guy who's like, he was training for Bill Farrow and he was a former Olympian and like former senior bronze medalist and junior world champion. And we were having great matches and he had beaten me like pretty bad the previous week, but I had been like really making big jumps quickly. And then we wrestled 2 matches like a week before Veterans Worlds and I beat him in the second match. And I was like, okay, peaking at the right time.
Yeah.
So I felt like, if I can hang with like top senior level guys, then then I was confident that I was going to like achieve the goal. My goal was world champion, but definitely bring home the medal. So I think it was like, kind of hard to predict what to expect, but roughly what I wanted.
That's awesome. Yeah. Who's the Egyptian that you were wrestling with?
His name's hard to pronounce.
Is he out there on the East Coast? Are you out on the East Coast right now?
Yeah, he was training at NYAC, New York Athletic Club.
I wonder if it was Mustafa.
Might have been.
Hey,
I forget. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I know he's out over there, and that dude is got gangs of medals like from senior level.
That's got to be him. Yeah.
He's awesome though. Such a good dude, man. So
he is.
Yeah.
Well, Andy, you're a smart guy. You're a Princeton grad, and sounds like you did some work there at USC to show us how extra smart you are. Talk to us a little bit about what draws a really intelligent guy like you to wrestling and what you love about the sport.
Yeah, I think like there's a lot of similarities between like I did my PhD in math, and I think there's a lot of similarities between like math and wrestling. I think they're sort of both like the hardest. Like one is like sort of intellectually the hardest thing you can do, and the other is like physically and mentally the hardest thing you can do.
Yeah.
And I think of, there's a lot of things that are kind of easy if you're naturally athletic or naturally smart, and they're just not that interesting to me. So I'd rather, choose the things that are really, really tough, that really push me to my limits, and then I'm actually genuinely proud of myself for getting through it. And I think that's definitely wrestling.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great.
Math, that is a tough PhD, bro. That's awesome though, man. That's super cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool. What is quick question over your entire like wrestling career, from when you started all the way through, what is one match or one wrestling event throughout your career that really like changed you as far as either as a wrestler, as a person, or taught you the most?
I mean, I think Veterans Worlds was maybe like the one that meant the most to me in a lot of ways, because I think I'd always struggled like mentally during my career, like overcoming nerves, performing like to my potential. Like I was always one of those guys that would wrestle really good in practice and be like, beating up really tough guys in the practice. And then like match would come around or tournament would come around. Part of it would be like dealing with injuries that was like sort of taking a toll on me mentally and physically. Like I had a lot of injuries in college, but then also it was sort of just like managing those nerves and rising to the occasion when it matters most. And I always struggled with that until like, returning to competition years later as a more mature person. I think I had a much better approach to that. And so I think I really was able to like grow from that experience because I was sort of aware of what was going on, like in my own head and, just aware of the whole thing instead of just kind of like freezing and being super nervous and,
Well, and that's a good point because a lot of people don't understand the wrestling match that's happening up here while you're also wrestling a match that's super physical on the dang mat. Like people just cannot fathom that unless you've been there. And that's as all wrestlers, right? We're like, gosh, and they're like, so that's awesome actually that you were able to overcome that because, from us that do wrestle, right? Holy cow, like that can mess your whole world up,
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's so tough. I was like, wrestling so much in practice for months and, feeling like, it's just a switch. You just go on, just wrestle. There's nothing to it. But then once you arrive at the arena, you're like, oh shit. And you just get hit with all these prayers and start thinking about outcomes and, losing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so it was a whole battle, just like getting myself to push all that stuff out and just focus on getting into my body wrestling.
Well, I definitely felt that nervous energy off you, Andy, when we met in the warm up room, the practice room. I could sense your kind of nervousness, and that's part of what we're doing as coaches. Just hey, we got it. We'll make sure you're in the right place. So you just worry about doing what you've been training for. You have to trust in your training cycle, and obviously you had a great one. So could you tell us a little bit about your training leading up to the Worlds and when that nervousness, I guess when you maybe kind of got control of it, I could definitely feel it off you when we first met and you were there. Hopefully I was able to take some of those things off your mind and you got a lot of brothers around you there wrestling and we're all there to help each other out. So I think that helped you too. I hope that helped you when you were out there as well.
Yeah, it definitely did. I was, talking to you and talking to Coach Brown and some of the guys who'd been there in the past, George and these guys. And
George.
Just, getting their feedback. I was telling them, I'm like, how do you manage this? And they're like, don't worry about it. So it was super helpful to have those experienced voices.
And what about your training cycle? Yeah, your training cycle leading up. What was that like?
Yeah, so I was actually in Berlin, Germany for like a couple months in the summer. And so I was training out there with a couple of the clubs there. And that was like they were really welcoming, they were happy to have, a former college wrestler there. And so that helped like fitness wise. But I also endured some injuries while I was over there, like tore my groin. So I was out for like 6 weeks and then basically just started getting back to training like in New York in mid-August. Like obviously I was like conditioning and rehab and all that, but in terms of wrestling, I only had like 6 weeks before Worlds to like get back into wrestling shape. And so that was at New York Athletic Club, and my former Princeton teammates were so helpful getting me ready. Brett Harner, who was an All-American for Princeton at 197, one of my big training partners. And I was getting better and better going with him because he's super tough. And then the Egyptian guy, Mustafa, was there as well. And one of our top Greco guys in the U.S. at 82 kilos, Adrian, Belarusian guy. He was wrestling with me, like doing a lot of parterre technique with me. And also like we would go Greco and we would go freestyle because he's still pretty good at freestyle, in part because he's just amazing at Greco. Force you into those positions even from freestyle. I had a great room at Nyack and then, going to the gym, conditioning really hard outside of that as well. And then tapering at the end. I reached out to my former college coach, Coach Ayers, for like, remind me, like, how do I taper? When should I start? What should the next couple weeks look like leading into the tournament? And he kind of helped me out with that.
That's awesome. And then another kind of historical advice question, but if you could go back, looking back now on your whole wrestling career, if you could tell your younger wrestling self a piece of advice that you think would be just crucial, what would that be?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be related to the mental game, like we were talking about, because that was the one I struggled with most back then. I think like focusing on like the task at hand and just trying to put in maximal effort and like just trying to block out all the stuff about thinking about outcomes, winning and losing. What are people going to think if I lose to this guy, and all that stuff that used to throw me off so much? And instead just thinking, first training your mental toughness, like with like conditioning sessions that are like brutal, like on the Airdyne, where it just like, at that point, like if you want to succeed in that session, you really just have to be so focused on the task at hand and just fighting through the pain. And I think like the toughness that you build like in those like brutal sessions translates into tournaments. And it's kind of different because now you're like battling nerves instead of the Airdyne, but it's a similar like learning to just overcome like whatever shit is in your mind.
That's such great advice. That's such great advice. Focusing on the task at hand and, not trying to chop down all the trees in the forest at once. You just got to chop that one right in front of you. What great advice, Andy. So we appreciate that. Hey, I got one more question before we go. And I got to know this about you, Andy.
Bro. Be ready, bro. Be ready. I don't know what but be ready.
I'm thinking about all through history. Anybody who has ever existed needs to be a famous person, somebody that, some of us would know. But who would you want to go get ice cream with, and what kind of ice cream would you get?
I've been on a Bob Dylan fix the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He's so charismatic and just sort of so magnetic. I would just love to. Yeah.
Yeah. And what kind of ice cream would you guys get?
There's a really good gelato place near me, and like in Greenwich Village, maybe get some tonight. And that's where he used to play music, actually, like in the 60s.
That's cool. Okay.
That's all right. What flavor are we getting, Andy? What flavor
is good no matter what the flavor.
Yeah, maybe like pistachio.
Dude,
pistachio.
No way. I was literally about to be like, I was literally about to be like, you can't go wrong with a pistachio, and then you said it. I'm like, what?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Guys, that's so awesome, man. That was cool, man. Definitely thanks for coming on, Andy. It was awesome. And thanks for tuning in to Grit and Gut, where toughness talks, because on the mat or in life, toughness isn't given, it's earned.